Chapter 7:16. The shooting practice only lasted for 2 to 3 days, and all the students were considered newbies who had touched a gun before. The school did not require all the students to score 10 points, but the spirit of participation was still important. It was a rare and valuable experience. Of course, even so, the results would still be recorded in the military training evaluation form. No one would complain about having too many good evaluations. Celestial, your request is a bit too much. We've only learned how to hold a gun, who knows how many points we'll score? It's not a big deal if Yun Zhao loses, Yarrow Baobao hurriedly said. Lose? Mph, there's no such word in my dictionary. Even if Yun Zhao loses, I can still win. I've played this game before at the club. Even if I close my eyes, I'm still better than Zhu Maijun, Hu Tianxian snorted softly. The thought of Zhu Maijun and Dao Ji made her feel disgusted. Jing Yunzhao and she were on the same side. If Jing Yunzhao lost, she would lose. If she, Hu Tianxian, lost to those two crazy dogs, she might as well drop out of school. I'll say the same thing again, I don't believe anyone else, but you. Hu Tianxian pointed at Jing Yunzhao and continued, anyway, no matter what kind of results you achieve, I won't be surprised. This lady's eye for people has always been right. You are, today you'll catch her off guard, tomorrow you'll beat her until she's utterly defeated, and then the day after. I remember that there's always a night of field training during the military training, right? When the time comes, our two classes will be together, and we'll have to carry weights for tens of kilometers. Those two idiots definitely won't be able to take it. Yun Zhao, we'll have to rely on you to win face for us. Jing Yunzhao was speechless when he heard this. Where did Hu Tianxian get her confidence from? Could it be that she was born with a face that could win? Celestial. Don't say that. Carrying weights for tens of kilometers is too much. We won't be able to take it. When the time comes, won't we be trash too? Yarrow Baobao looked terrified. Hu Tianxian rolled her eyes. You're so stupid. How can we be the same? It's normal that I can't take it. They're all good-for-nothings, and I'm just pampered. Hu Tianxian opened her mouth and spouted nonsense. Jing Yunzhao shook his head in shame. Fortunately, Celestial Immortal Hu didn't go against her. Otherwise, she wouldn't be able to stand Celestial Immortal Hua's narcissism. Even if she didn't praise herself for a day, she would feel uncomfortable all over. However, it was also interesting. She was a person who had a clear distinction between friend and foe. Those who provoked her would be degraded by her to the point that they were worthless. If one gained her favor, she would praise them to the heavens. As for the other strangers, they didn't even spare them a glance. When they walked, they didn't even look sideways and were as proud as a peacock. However, the way she abhorred evil was somewhat similar to Xiao Haiqing. Their personalities were also very straightforward. The only difference was that Hu Tianxian was strong, tolerant, and sensible. On the other hand, Hu Tianxian was domineering, arrogant, and sunny. Jing Yunzhao couldn't help but take a few more glances at Hu Tianxian. If it was Xiao Haiqing, she would have immediately pounced on her with a passionate expression. However, Hu Tianxian casually glanced at her and snorted. I know that I'm beautiful, but you don't have to look at me like that, right? My sexual orientation is very normal. Don't worry, my sexual orientation is also very normal. Jing Yunzhao's mouth twitched. She heard the whistle outside and walked out in unison. Do you mean that you have someone you like? Hu Tianxian hurriedly followed her. She smiled and said, I heard that beautiful women are always paired with ugly men. Could it be that he's ugly? Chapter 7:17. Hu Tianxian put her hand on Jing Yunzhao's shoulder. She looked willful and arrogant, but at the same time, she was adorable in a different way. This kind of eldest mistemper was usually harmless. Although she was temperamental, at least she knew what was right and wrong. If she was like Hong Wen back then, Jing Yunzhao would have long avoided her. Don't worry. If I find someone I like in the future, I promise I will let you meet him. Jing Yunzhao was speechless. Then it's a deal. Don't worry, I am not interested in a married man. I won't snatch him. Hu Tianxian finished her words and laughed. When the voice reached Qi Zhong's ears, He immediately frowned and glanced at the crazy young lady. His gaze carried a hint of helplessness that he could not bear. However, Hu Tianxian didn't care about Qi Zhong's dignity at all. She rolled her eyes at him and strode to her seat with her head held high. Although her actions were obedient, she didn't forget to provoke Qi Zhong. It wouldn't be long before the military training was over. When that time came, Hu Tianxian would be in charge. She didn't believe that she couldn't teach Qi Zhong a lesson. Since he liked to make her do push-ups so much, she would make him do push-ups and sing conquer every day. When Jing Yunjiao saw Hu Tianxian's eyes, he knew that she was imagining things again. He looked at Qi Zhong sympathetically. He wondered how many times Hu Tianxian had killed Qi Zhong. The students stood neatly and ran to the shooting range. One after another, students from other classes finished their exercises and left. Some of them were excited, while others were disappointed and even reluctant to leave. Especially for boys, the time it took for them to complete their shooting dreams was too short. Jing Yunjiao, I heard from Dao Ji that you are an orphan and came from a small town. It seems that you have never played this game before, right? By the way, when Qi Zhong was explaining about firearms, you were very fascinated. That's right. It would be strange if an ignorant person like you wasn't curious. There were many girls behind Ju Mai-jun, who looked confident. She was clearly trying to overwhelm her with her aura. Jing Yunjiao chuckled. Class Rep Ju, don't talk too big. It'll be ugly if you get slapped in the face later. We still don't know who will be the one slapping their faces. There will be many exciting shows in the next 2 days. Let's wait and see, Ju Mai-jun said immediately. Originally, the relationship between the two of them was very peaceful, but after more than 10 days, things slowly changed. During all kinds of training, Jing Yunjiao was the one who was praised by instructor Qi. He didn't make any mistakes and was the best in all kinds of training. Ju Maiyun was also the class monitor and had the same instructor, but the comparison was getting worse and worse. Every day, after the others finished their training, Ju Mai-jun would use the excuse of teaching others to train herself. She wanted to be perfect, for fear that the instructor would say that she was inferior to Jing Yunjiao. In fact, Qi Zhong would never compare others with Jing Yunjiao. Because of Li Xiaoyun, he would never put his sister-in-law, Jing Yunjiao, on the same level as others. It was just that there were always people who liked to stir up trouble for no reason. At present, the students from the 2 classes were quietly waiting for the other 2 classes to start shooting. They were all excited and looking forward to it. Ju Mai-jun, in particular, felt that she had found a place to be useful. She had been to those shooting clubs a few times. Although she wasn't very good at it, she was better than the newbies. There was no way that she would lose to Jing Yunjiao. Class A07 and Class A08, 2 groups in one group, 4 in each group. Line up. Qi Zhong finally opened his mouth. The 2 groups were students from the 2 classes. Qi Zhong deliberately arranged it because he knew that the competition between the 2 classes was fierce. Chapter 718. As class monitors, Jing Yunjiao and Ju Mai-jun were responsible for the students' discipline. They watched from the side and were placed at the end of the line. In the shooting segment, each person was given 10 bullets. This time, it was a real gun with real bullets. The distance was 200 meters, and the shooting was done while lying prone. The students in the first row lay down, adjusted the guns in their hands, and aimed at an empty target in the distance. Suddenly, the sound of gunshots rang out. Some people felt extremely excited when they heard this sound, but some people felt a chill down their spines and some were afraid. After the first round of shooting, the person behind the mound in the distance appeared to check the target. Miss, 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 2 points, 1 point, a total of 3 points. All missed the target, 0 points, all missed the target. The 8 people in the first row didn't even get a total of 10 points, not to mention that each person had 10 chances to shoot. When the results were announced, the students were disappointed. However, it was their first time. Even if the results weren't good, it didn't dampen their enthusiasm. They even felt that it was good that all 8 of them weren't wiped out. After 2 teams finished, it was Hu Tianxian's turn. Coincidentally, Dao Ji was also in the opposing team. Hua Tianxian raised her eyebrows and smiled at Dao Ji, a trace of disdain flashing in her eyes. In the next second, she laid down and stared at the target in the distance, firing a few shots. Every time Dao Ji saw Hua Tianxian, she would reveal a sense of inferiority and guilt. Her face was gloomy, and her speed was much slower. 5 points, 6 points, 4 points. When Hua Tianxian's results were announced, it was obvious that she was better than the others. All 10 shots hit the target, and her total score was about 60 points. For a newbie, this was not bad. Especially when one of her shots hit the 9th point. It was unknown if she was just lucky. Qi Zhong showed a rare expression of appreciation. Not bad. I've only played with this gun for 2 days. Otherwise, all my shots would have hit the 8th point or above. Hua Tianxian didn't appreciate the praise at all. Qi Zhong looked helpless. This woman really couldn't be praised. Looking at Dao Ji again, her expression was extremely ugly. Out of 10 bullets, 9 of them had missed the target, and the remaining one had only hit the bullseye. Even Yarrow Baobao had more points than her, much less celestial immortal Hua. An idiot will always be an idiot. Hua Tianxian stood up, brushed the dust off her clothes, and rolled her eyes at Dao Ji. Dao Ji was trembling with anger. Her face was pale and she was extremely disappointed. If it wasn't for Qi Zhong, the instructor, who had always been strict, she really wanted to beg the instructor to let her do it again. Dao Ji was embarrassed, and Zhu Maijun also felt ashamed. Everyone else in the class looked at Dao Ji and shook their heads in disappointment. What are you so proud of? I haven't called yet, Zhu Maijun whispered. With an ashen face, she looked at the remaining students coming forward. She didn't forget to remind them one by one, for fear that they would forget the shooting technique. However, after being nagged by her too much, the students of A08 were also a little irritated. They couldn't concentrate, especially after she reminded them. If they didn't shoot well, it would be said that they didn't listen to her, but if they shot well, it would be her credit. When Jing Yunjiao and Zhu Maijun came forward, the students next to them began to nag. Class monitor, you were quite talkative when you were shooting just now. I'm sure your shooting technique has reached perfection. Don't miss the target. Zhu Maijun smiled confidently. Miss the target? It wasn't like she hadn't touched a gun before. How could she miss the target? Just as she was thinking, Jing Yunjiao's gunshot rang out. Chapter 719. Jing Yunjiao adjusted her breathing and focused her divine power. After she calmed down, she focused her gaze on the bullseye and pulled the trigger as if she could not hear the noise around her. Zhu Maijun glanced at her sideways. Shooting so quickly, she would probably miss the target, right? She smiled and tried her best to complete the task with peace of mind. Jing Yunjiao's first shot was a little jerky. She clearly felt that she had deviated from her target. However, she was very adaptable. Because she had absorbed the spirit jade, her spiritual power was relatively high. She immediately corrected herself and continued shooting. After a few consecutive shots, she put away her gun and stood up. Zhu Maijun moved slowly, but she looked quite imposing. The surrounding students stared at the shooting range with curiosity and anticipation. They stared at each other as if they were trying to show off, waiting for Jing Yunjiao and Zhu Maijun's results to be announced. After a while, Zhu Maijun finished. The person in charge of counting the targets told Qi Zhong the results, and he announced it personally. Qi Zhong stared at the paper in his hand with a surprised expression. He said, Zhu Maijun, a total of 38 points. She did not miss the target. Not bad. Zhu Maijun was stunned. Only 38 points. However, she quickly comforted herself. Her results were indeed not high. She was much better than the others. Some of them scored 0. There were not many students who scored more than 15 points. It was a pity that she could not beat that peacock like Hua Tianxian. Jing Yunjiao, a total of 99 points. She hit the bullseye 9 times. Everyone was envious of Zhu Maijun's results when Qi Zhong suddenly announced. Everyone was stunned for a moment. Instructor Qi, did you get it wrong? It should be 9 or 19 points, right? Dao Ji immediately said. How could it be 99 points? If it was 99 points, didn't that mean that she only missed the bullseye once? Even though she did not hit the bullseye, it was only a slight deviation. Not to mention 9 10th ring players, none of them had even hit a 9th ring player. Who were they trying to fool? That's right. Jing Yunjiao's results also surprised me, Qi Zhong confirmed. The surprise in his heart was no less than that of these students. He also had a certain understanding of Jing Yunjiao. He knew that she had been living in Hua Ning County since she was a child. At most, she would go to Ning City. Before this, she had never come into contact with these things. However, in just 2 days, she had mastered the skills. It should be known that even real soldiers could not achieve this result. 9/10. According to his guess, Jing Yunjiao's first shot was off by a little, but he quickly realized it. After adapting to it, he immediately adjusted himself and did a perfect shot. Such talent was hard to come by. Is it really 99? Hua Tianxian grinned and patted Jing Yunjiao on the shoulder. I knew you wouldn't be bad. That being said, Hua Tianxian couldn't help but mutter in her heart, is this guy even human? This result wasn't just not bad, it was heaven-defying. I don't believe it. How could she have such a good result? Instructor, you're biased towards her, right? Dao Ji immediately said. She had never come into contact with guns before, and Jing Yunjiao couldn't have come into contact with them either. They were clearly the same, so why were their results different? She got 2 points, and Jing Yunjiao's one shot that did not hit the bullseye was higher than her total score. Why? When Dao Ji said this, Qi Zhong's face suddenly turned ugly. You suspect that I'm cheating? Dao Ji's heart skipped a beat. The target that the bullet went through just now was not dealt with. You can verify whether it's fake or not, Qi Zhong said. Chapter 720. Dao Ji and Zhu Maijun were scared to death of Qi Zhong, but when they thought about how Jing Yunjiao had gotten such a high score, they still couldn't believe it. Under the instructor's scrutinizing gaze, they dragged a group of people and hurriedly ran to the target. However, there was no doubt that there was nothing fake about it. Suddenly, they all looked at Jing Yunjiao with extremely frightened eyes. However, Jing Yunjiao only glanced at the two of them coldly, then followed the team out of the shooting range. He didn't even give them any extra expression, as if they didn't even exist in his eyes. How could he get such a high score? Dao Ji, didn't you say that he's from the same hometown as you? He's just a country bumpkin, how could he know how to shoot? Zhu Maijun was so angry that she spoke without thinking. When Dao Ji heard this, a trace of anger appeared on her face. Zhu Maijun said that Jing Yunjiao was a country bumpkin, so wasn't she saying that she was too? Although she came from Hua Ning County was also very prosperous. Although it couldn't be compared to the capital, it didn't have to be so bad. Class monitor, maybe he has talent in this area. Dao Ji had to admit. What talent? I don't believe it. You're just stupid to be fooled by him. Maybe he's played this game before. Dao Ji, you definitely can't lose tomorrow's competition with Jing Yunjiao. I hate him when I see him now. If we lose even the combat, then this military training is just asking to be humiliated. I know, but, actually, Jing Yunjiao has Instructor Qi backing him up in the base, so we can't do anything. It'll be more convenient when we return to school, right? Isn't your uncle a school professor? Also, as long as you join the student council, he'll be lower than you everywhere, right? Dao Ji continued. Although her grades were good in the past, in a university, they were all in the past and didn't have any effect. In addition, she didn't have money and connections like Zhu Maijun. Even if she wanted to kick Jing Yunjiao out, it would be impossible. She even had to be wary of Hua Tianxian by Jing Yunjiao's side. Therefore, she could only stand on the same side as Zhu Maijun. Now that they had the same enemy, she could only please Zhu Maijun and help her. Zhu Maijun walked at the back of the team, her face full of indignation. Looking at Jing Yunjiao's back, she only felt that her self-esteem had been shattered. On this day, it was rare for Zhu Maijun, Dao Ji, and the others to be so well behaved. The entire A08 had a gloomy look on their faces. In front of Jing Yunjiao's classmates, they had no confidence at all. The boys didn't know much about the grudges between the girls. Previously, they had been forced to participate, but now that they saw Jing Yunzhao's amazing strength, they were a little more curious about her. When it was time to rest, some boys would come up to chat with him. Unfortunately, Jing Yunzhao treated everyone the same. He wasn't cold, but he kept his distance. Even so, Ju Mai-jun was still unwilling to give up. She was clearly the class monitor of A08, but all the male students in her class were staring at Jing Yunzhao. Wasn't it just 9 consecutive strikes with 10 points? It was just a stroke of luck. A blind cat meeting a dead mouse. While Ju Mai-jun was aggressive, Dao Ji was the opposite. She didn't have much fighting spirit, but she was still unwilling to give up on Jing Yunzhao. However, she also knew that Jing Yunzhao was indeed better than her in every aspect. She couldn't do anything. The only thing she could rely on was this fighting competition. She longed to beat Jing Yunzhao ruthlessly and make her lose face completely. The people in the 2 classes were looking forward to it. In the blink of an eye, the appointed day had arrived. Chapter 721. Among the dozens of students, Jing Yunzhao was still the most outstanding one. Even after being exposed to the sun for so long, her skin was still as fair as ever. Coupled with her already outstanding face, it was impossible for people not to notice her. Jing Yunzhao had a smile in her eyes, but it was a dangerous smile that made one's scalp tingle. Tomorrow is the last day of military training. After today's match, there will be field training at night. You all must prepare in advance. No matter what, you must participate. Otherwise, you will be considered disqualified, Qizhong said. The 2 classes stood opposite each other with an empty space in the middle. Everyone was rubbing their hands together, looking very confident. Jing Yunzhao really couldn't understand where their self-confidence came from. During this period of time, she had personally witnessed her classmates learning fighting techniques. It could be said that the things that Qizhong taught them, they had only learned the surface of the surface. Their movements were indeed still considered coherent, but they had not grasped the true techniques at all. They only knew how to use brute force. As for her classmates, she didn't teach them at all. After all, she didn't need to teach them at all. She was the first to fight. Not to mention a tag team battle, even if everyone from the other class came at her together, they wouldn't be a threat to her at all. Little second Jing, beat her hard, okay? This time, it'll be fine as long as you don't cripple her or kill her. In any case, this is a proper competition that the instructor allowed, so getting hurt and suffering is within the acceptable range. Hua Tianxian winked. Ever since Jing Yunzhao had performed the 9 rings yesterday, Hua Tianxian had become more and more affectionate towards her. In the end, the 4 of them were ranked based on age. The 4 of them were the same age, only a few months apart. Yaro Baobao was the youngest, Ren Xingyue was the 3rd, and Jing Yunzhao's real birthday should be about a month older than the one on her ID. This was because the ID listed her birthday as the day Yi Qin picked her up. Hua Tianxian should be born in the same year and month as her, only a few days apart. It was hard to say who was older, but Hua Tianxian didn't care about that at all. She directly became the big sister. Hearing the word waiter, Jing Yunzhao felt a little helpless. However, being a mistress was better than being a mistress. Ren Xingyue was much more pitiful than her. Jing Yunzhao raised his foot and walked out. He rubbed his wrist and made 2 cracking sounds. He looked at Dao Ji with a faintly discernible smile. She promised that after today, Dao Ji would only see her trembling and nothing else. Jing Yunzhao's stare made Dao Ji's hair stand on end. Amidst the crowd's jeering, she walked to the center of the field and nervously stepped forward. Thinking of the slaps that Jing Yunzhao had given her before, she was filled with resentment and directly rushed over. Although it was called a fight, in Jing Yunzhao's eyes, it was just a slightly more ferocious scratching technique than before. She practiced all kinds of moves on a daily basis, but when it was time to use them, she couldn't remember anything at all. She still relied on her neatly clipped fingernails. There was still a field training at night. If Dao Ji was beaten black and blue, she wouldn't have to endure the pain of the field training. Therefore, Jing Yunzhao wasn't that stupid. He immediately stomped his feet, causing dust to fly up. His hand fiercely pulled, sliding from Dao Ji's shoulder to her wrist. Suddenly, Dao Ji only felt that her arm was incomparably numb. Jing Yunjiao exerted force on her tendons, acupuncture points, and joints. A light press was enough to make Dao Ji unable to resist. The crowd saw that Dao Ji's bravery didn't last for more than 3 seconds before she began to howl with a bitter face. Jing Yunjiao's technique was strange. Dao Ji was like a clay doll, allowing Jing Yunjiao to do whatever she wanted. With a bang, Dao Ji fell to the ground. Jing Yunjiao still didn't let her go. They heard a series of bone-chilling sounds coming from Dao Ji's arm, as if it was crippled by Jing Yunjiao. Seeing this, everyone broke out in cold sweat. Chapter 722. Jing Yunjiao's movements were clean and tidy. Everyone was shocked to see Dao Ji screaming non-stop. During this period of time, Jing Yunjiao was extremely well behaved. She didn't do anything out of the ordinary that would attract people's attention. She also learned the things that the instructors taught her. Her usual drills didn't seem to be any different from the others, so why did she suddenly become so good? Dao Ji felt as though she was in a state of torment. It was as though a huge rock was pressing down on her body. Her entire body was aching and she even felt dizzy. Being thrown around by Jing Yunjiao, her stomach was churning. It was extremely uncomfortable. Shock, fear, begging for mercy. I've lost. I've admitted defeat. Jing Yunjiao, I beg you, please let me go. Jing Yunjiao lifted her up and snorted softly, if you admit defeat, you'll have to make a promise and guarantee in front of everyone. I'll do it. I'll do it. Her face was frighteningly purple. Jing Yunjiao's gaze was cold as she smirked. This time, you'd better believe your words. Otherwise, I can let you have a taste of this anytime. Dao Ji was in despair. Jing Yunjiao was doing this on purpose. She had purposely let her learn to fight happily, thinking that she could take revenge for her previous humiliation. But in reality, Jing Yunjiao knew that she couldn't win. She had purposely put on an act so that she would be humiliated and beaten up in front of so many people. Her efforts over the past few days had all turned into a joke. She knew that she cared about her reputation. That was why, Jing Yunjiao. Her anger was torrential, but it was accompanied by a chill. She couldn't win against Jing Yunjiao. Every time she thought that she could make Jing Yunjiao panic, she would end up like this. Ever since she met Jing Yunjiao, this had never changed. Her body was trembling. She could clearly feel that she couldn't breathe properly. That suffocating feeling was as though death was about to befall her. Her vision was filled with darkness and Jing Yunjiao's enlarged face was the only thing she could see. It was extremely beautiful. But, it made her feel terrified. Was he really going to kill her? She seemed to have heard the panicked cries of the surrounding students. But, why was it still so difficult to breathe? Jing Yunjiao still wouldn't let go. Jing Yunjiao held her by the neck with a cruel smile on her face. Zhu Maijun and a group of people were shouting and yelling at her, but as soon as they rushed forward, they were kicked back by Jing Yunjiao. Looking at the weak breathing in front of him, Jing Yunjiao felt that it was about time and let go. Jing Yunjiao, are you crazy? Are you really going to strangle her to death? Zhu Maijun was also shocked. Jing Yunjiao was too ruthless. They could feel that Dao Ji was struggling less and less. They thought that Dao Ji was about to be strangled to death by Jing Yunjiao. Only then did she let go. Cough, cough, cough. Dao Ji's vision was foggy. He was speechless. Isn't she fine? Jing Yunjiao raised his voice and asked, Instructor Qi, this is a competition. It's not a big deal to have some minor injuries, right? Everyone choked. They had been looking forward to this day for a long time, especially Zhu Maijun and Dao Ji. Originally, they thought that if they could win, they would beat Jing Yunjiao to a pulp. However, they didn't expect that they weren't as strong as Jing Yunjiao. In the end, they were suppressed by her. Qi Zhong didn't stop them from beginning to end. He wanted to do his duty as an instructor, but Jing Yunjiao still had the crossing life ointment. If she got angry and stopped producing ointment for the military, he would cry but have no tears. Moreover, He also knew that Jing Yunjiao was deliberately trying to scare Dao Ji. It was impossible for her to really kill her. Moreover, if Dao Ji was strong enough, she probably wouldn't let her go. Dao Ji lost. But if I remember correctly, the rest is a tag team battle. Who's next? Squad leader Ju, shouldn't you take the lead? Jing Yunjiao raised his eyebrows and said. Chapter 723. Just a second ago, Ju Maijun was still a little indignant, but the next moment, when she heard that Jing Yunjiao wanted her to fight, she suddenly shuddered and quickly let go of Dao Ji. No. My stomach is not feeling well now. Her ability was similar to Dao Ji's. If she fought with Jing Yunjiao, wouldn't she be courting death? Moreover, Jing Yunjiao hated her so much. If he beat her up like he did to Dao Ji, what would she do? Ju Maijun was dumbfounded. If she knew that Jing Yunjiao was so powerful, they wouldn't have to train so hard because no matter how hard they trained, it would be useless. Don't even mention Ju Maijun, who didn't dare to step forward. Even the highly praised martial artist from A08 subconsciously took a few steps back. For a moment, the students from the opposite class looked at Jing Yunjiao and looked at each other, but no one was willing to step forward. We haven't fought yet, and you're already ready to run away? Jing Yunjiao smiled and said coldly. Qi Zhong frowned and was somewhat displeased. He despised people with no backbone the most. After training them for half a month, they didn't even have the courage to fight. It would be strange if he was happy. Instructor Qi, it seems that a one-on-one fight is impossible. How about we all fight together? That should be fine, right? Jing Yunjiao said again. Her gaze swept across the few students who had openly spoken ill of her, revealing a faint smile, which was frightening. Hearing her words, the students of A08 breathed a sigh of relief. Fight together? Then they wouldn't be beaten to a pulp by Jing Yunjiao, right? No matter how powerful she was, she only had a pair of hands and feet. How could she defend against so many people? Suddenly, they surrounded her. Xiao, can we do it? It doesn't make sense to let them take advantage of us. Hu Tianxian frowned. Jing Yunjiao's back was facing her classmates. She waved her hand behind her, indicating for everyone to retreat. At the same time, the students from the other class immediately formed a circle. Under Ju Meijuan's signal, they all rushed forward. Hu Tianxian closed her eyes. She couldn't bear to look at them. Don't pull me, I really don't want to see this scene. Hu Tianxian curled her lips. Wasn't Jing Yunjiao too stupid? He could have beaten them to a pulp, but he gave them a chance. No, the students of A08 are so pitiful, especially those few. Yarrow Baobao pulled her arm again. Hu Tianxian opened her eyes and was stunned for a moment. She was stunned for a moment, and the next second, she laughed wildly. I've seen it now, I've seen that our second brother is a master. His left, right, the other students, no matter how happy they were, the others, to the left, a right, they be the next second, they would be the next second, they would be the next second, they would be the next, they, to a few, to them, to, they was. Of the other students, Ju Maijun was the most pitiful one among them. Even though she was careful, she still followed in Dao Ji's footsteps. She was thrown around by Jing Yunjiao for a few rounds, and her bones were weak. Jing Yunjiao had been holding back his anger for a few days, and now, he was finally able to vent it all. Looking at the messy scene, the corner of Qi Zhong's mouth twitched. He was speechless. Although he admired women who were straightforward and decisive, it didn't seem good to be too violent. Someone like Jing Yunjiao was indeed more suitable for Li Xiaoyun. Most people wouldn't be able to bear such a grudge. On the training ground, the other students were a little confused when they saw this scene from afar. They thought that the students of A07 and A08 were wrestling to build their relationship. By the time Jing Yunjiao stopped, there were howls of pain all around. Instructor, I didn't hit them too hard. They should still be participating in tonight's field training, right? Hu Tianxian and the other two eagerly massaged her arm. Jing Yunjiao said with a domineering expression. Even if she was covered in sweat, she could still smile brightly. The night passed very quickly. Everyone only felt that they had just closed their eyes when a whistle sounded outside. They subconsciously sat up. Without opening their eyes, they had already gotten out of bed and started to tidy up their blankets. Clearly, it had become a habit. The training ground was filled with neatly arranged teams. The students were all carrying heavy bags and taking advantage of the moonlight that had yet to disperse. They set off on their journey. The field training this time wasn't on the main roads or roads, but on the mountain roads and small roads. However, in order to avoid any accidents, all the instructors followed the team. In addition, there were also medical vehicles accompanying them so that it would be easier to deal with any problems that arose. Because it was still quite early, there was still a cool breeze blowing and it wasn't too hot. However, the field training had only just begun and it didn't take long before everyone became listless. Jing Yunjiao was naturally fine, but Ju Mai-jun and the others were not. Dragging a sickly body and carrying a large pile of things, how could he hold on? Qi Zhong was fiercely staring at them from the side. If they backed down, they would be evaluated as unqualified and their records wouldn't look good. Chapter 725. Most of the students were spoiled since they were young. The arduous journey was torture for them. Jing Xiao'er, are you carrying cotton? Don't you think it's heavy? Hua Tianxian shook her head and sighed. She was sweating profusely and her feet felt like they were filled with lead. Every step was very difficult. No, I can't take it anymore. It's too far and I'm carrying such heavy things. I'm so hungry now. My chest is sticking to my back. Yarrow Baobao looked wronged. Ren Xingyue was fine. Although her face was red from exhaustion, it wasn't as exaggerated as the two young ladies. Jing Yunjiao sighed. Forget it. Give me your bags. The road wasn't easy to walk. Although it wasn't very steep, there were a lot of rocks on the road. It was fine if they walked for a short period of time, but it was different after a few hours. Many people's feet would probably have blisters. Aren't you tired? Hua Tianxian was still a little hesitant. Jing Yunjiao shook her head and took the bag in her hand and hung it in front of her. As for Yarrow Baobao's bag, she held it in her hand. The others were even more speechless. In the beginning, they were a little unconvinced of Jing Yunjiao's position as the class monitor. They only felt that she was lucky enough to know the instructor and went through the back door to get preferential treatment. However, in the past half a month, the training that Jing Yunjiao received was not any less than theirs. In fact, every training session was perfect. The instructor was indeed a little amiable towards her, but it couldn't be considered biased because she had to participate in all kinds of training. Not only was she beautiful, but she was also stronger than them. What else was there to say? They were completely convinced. Moreover, she had won a lot of face for the class in the shooting and fighting competitions. Class monitor, when you graduate, I'll ask my dad to invite you to work in our family's company. How about it? A classmate suddenly said. Half of the students in A07 were from wealthy families. Jing Yunjiao was stunned. Before she could speak, Hua Tianxian said, Are you close to her? Even if Xiao'er wants to go there in the future, he should go to our house. After she graduated, her parents would give her a sum of money to start her own business. When the time came, she would start her own company. As her roommate, Jing Yunjiao would definitely help her if he didn't have a job. The major they studied was actually quite demanding. They had to learn everything, but they couldn't master anything. It was also a leadership major. It was actually very difficult for them to find a high-paying job on their own after graduation because no company would hire a new graduate to manage the company. Therefore, many people had to start from the bottom. They still had to slowly work their way up. Without a background, most people's jobs would end up being different from what they had learned. In fact, she was also a little curious as to why Jing Yunjiao would study such a major. Looking at her appearance, she clearly seemed to be very interested in medical skills because she would stare at the medical books these days no matter how busy or tired she was. Obviously, she was a medical fanatic. Hua Tianxian's boastful personality was well known by her classmates. They also knew that she came from an extraordinary background, so no one felt that there was anything wrong with what she said. After Hua Tianxian finished speaking, she even asked Jing Yunjiao, "How about it? Will you help me after we graduate?" "Let's talk about it later," Jing Yunjiao said indifferently. Hua Tianxian pursed her lips, but the light in her eyes remained. At this moment, Qi Zhong looked at Hua Tianxian's relaxed appearance. He walked to the side and said, "You can't even bear this little hardship. You're a burden." When Hua Tianxian heard this, her eyebrows immediately raised. She reached out and directly took back the things that Jing Yunjiao was holding for her. "I'll work hard even if I don't steam buns." Chapter 726. Hua Tianxian's temper came and went quickly. She cared about her reputation and didn't want to embarrass herself in front of Qi Zhong, the big bad guy. She took her bag back and continued to walk forward obediently. Yarrow Baobao saw that Hua Tianxian was obediently holding on, so she rested for a while and also took her bag back. As time passed, Qi Zhong became more and more ruthless when he saw the students at the back of the line crying as they walked. The ones crying were Ju Mai-jun and the others. Naturally, they could continue to walk forward, but the places where they were beaten up yesterday were still hurting, so they felt extremely wronged. If they had gritted their teeth and persisted, Qi Zhong might have softened his heart and let them rest for a while. However, they were all crying like they were going to a funeral, which was unlucky. In comparison, Qi Zhong felt that Hua Tianxian was more sensible. Although she was a little arrogant, at least she had some backbone. After being tormented by him for so many days, she was covered in dust. No matter how badly she fell, he didn't see her shed a single tear. However, this wasn't the first time Ju Mai-jun and the others had cried. "Hua Tianxian, sing a song for me," Qi Zhong suddenly roared. Hua Tianxian was shocked. She slipped on the stone and fell to the ground. Jing Yunjiao quickly went forward to help her up. Before he could comfort her, he heard Hua Tianxian yelling, "Instructor Qi, did you do it on purpose?" Her loud voice was like the sound of a bell, which could scare people to death. Hua Tianxian brushed her body and felt a slight pain in her ankle. She was a little annoyed. Just as she was about to take off her slippers to check, she saw Qi Zhong staring at her with a dark face, as if she had done something bad again. She immediately raised her head, puffed out her chest, and rolled her eyes at him. "Instructor, I don't know how to." "Instructor, it seems like you're not tired at all. Why don't you sing?" she said again. As soon as she said that, the other students also shouted, "Instructor, sing. Come on, Instructor Qi." The corner of Jing Yunjiao's mouth twitched, but he realized that the students seemed to be in better spirits after the commotion, so he decided to help. "Instructor Qi, you should know a few military songs, right?" She was always the one leading the singing of the military songs. She had a hard time being the class monitor. Qi Zhong was a straightforward person. He didn't refuse and said, "Unity is strength." His voice was loud and clear, causing one's heart to skip a beat. Celestial Immortal Hua rolled her eyes repeatedly, and only managed to utter 2 words after a long while, "Tacky." Hua Tianxian was standing behind Jing Yunjiao, so she didn't notice that she was limping. In addition, most of the students were tired. Some were supporting each other, and some had blisters on the soles of their feet. They walked irregularly, so no one could tell that there was anything wrong with them. Qi Zhong sang one military song after another. It was the same for the other classes. The instructor's singing was loud and clear to inspire the students. They had lunch outside. It was as if they had returned to the primitive times. It was more quiet and lively. On the way back, the students were obviously in a sorry state. They reeked of sweat, and there was a lot of dust and dirt on their faces. They were exhausted, but when they thought about how it was going to end soon, their eyes lit up with anticipation. "Celestial Immortal?" Ren Xingyue suddenly shouted. Jing Yunjiao turned around and saw Hua Tianxian. She froze. Her face was pale, and she was holding her ankle. Qi Zhong was a few steps away. He strode over and asked, "What's going on?" "I don't know. Just now, she suddenly stopped walking." Ren Xingyue looked suspicious. "Hua Tianxian." Qi Zhong's expression was serious. Chapter 727. Hu Tianxian sniffled at Qi Zhong's shout. She stood up and said, "What are you shouting for? I'm just taking a break." Jing Yunjiao's gaze landed on her ankle. Her gaze paused for a moment before she squatted down and straightened up her pant leg. Everyone was shocked when they saw a big red and swollen bump on her ankle. "You sprained your ankle? Why didn't you say so earlier?" Jing Yunjiao asked directly. She didn't cherish her body at all. Judging from the severity of the injury, it should have been more than a while. How could she bear with it and walk for so long? Although this kind of injury could be healed with rest, her injury was serious. If the sprained area wasn't fixed in time, it could easily heal and loosen, causing instability in the ankle joint and causing habitual sprains in the future. "I thought I scraped my skin when I fell." Hu Tianxian was shocked herself. "But it shouldn't be a problem, right? We'll be there soon. I don't want to be called a burden by some people. By the way, don't look at me like that. You're the one who caused me to fall. If you hadn't suddenly called out to me, I wouldn't have been so shocked that I missed my step." Hu Tianxian's eyes were red. She had never suffered such a serious injury in her life. Her legs used to be beautiful, but now they were swollen like steamed buns. It was so ugly. However, just as she finished speaking, Hu Tianxian was lifted up by Qi Zhong. "Sister-in-law, take care of the team. I'll bring her to the ambulance for the doctor." Jing Yunjiao's mouth twitched. Sister-in-law? It was fine if he couldn't change the way he shouted when there was no one around, but now in front of so many people, Jing Yunjiao's face turned pale. Unfortunately, Qi Zhong had already run far away by the time he finished speaking. Hu Tianxian was even more shocked, but she didn't forget to say a few words of arrogance. Jing Yunjiao also knew medicine, so he could deal with emergencies. However, Hu Tianxian couldn't continue walking anyway. It was just right for her to rest in the ambulance. "Great Immortal, are you okay? It seems quite serious." Yarrow Baobao mumbled. "Great Immortal?" Jing Yunjiao was stunned. "That's right. Didn't she say that she's the boss? She's called Great Deity. How cool is that?" Yarrow Baobao grinned. Jing Yunjiao's mouth twitched, and Ren Xingyue couldn't help but burst into laughter. With Hu Tianxian's narcissistic personality, she would probably go crazy if she knew that Yarrow Baobao had called her Great Deity. "You called her Great Deity, but what did you call Jing Yunjiao and me?" Ren Xingyue asked curiously. Baby Yarrow's eyes flashed and she coughed. "Jing Jing, Xing Xing." Jing Yunjiao heaved a sigh of relief. Luckily, it wasn't Jing Xiaoa. It sounded like a waiter from a restaurant. At the same time, Hu Tianxian was thrown onto the small bed at the back of the sanitarium. Qi Zhong sat on the bed as well. He pointed at her feet and said to the medical staff, "Disinfect and fix it. Hurry up." "Oh, Instructor Qi, you also know how to treat illnesses?" Hu Tianxian was still like a hedgehog. "It's not wrong to say that you're a burden. You don't even have common sense. You think walking for a few hours with injuries is very cool? You think you can do it? Stupid." Qi Zhong didn't show any mercy. Hu Tianxian was so angry that her face turned pale. Why didn't she admit defeat? Wasn't it because Qi Zhong, that damned instructor, always said that she was useless and disliked her temper? She had been like this since she was young. She would rather lose a city than lose her dignity. However, she really felt wronged now. She had to set off before dawn and was so tired that she was about to collapse. It was already good that she was able to persist in this situation. It was fine if he didn't admire her, but he actually said that she was stupid. Chapter 728. Plop. Tears began to roll down her cheeks. Qi Zhong was stunned. Why was she crying for no reason? "You still have the cheek to cry?" Qi Zhong asked after a few seconds. Hu Tianxian was enraged. Her face was still covered in tears as she glared at Qi Zhong. "It's none of your business if I want to cry. If it weren't for you, my leg would be fine. It's so swollen that I won't be able to wear nice shoes when I get back to school. How dare you yell at me? What's so great about being an instructor? All I did was give you a few harsh words before. You've been holding a grudge against me for half a month, and you're still a man. I've never seen a stinky man like you who doesn't have any kindness or humanity. Just you wait. After tomorrow, I'll see how you'll bully me." After they returned home in the afternoon, they would conclude their military training. Tomorrow was the day they would set off for school. Qi Zhong rubbed his temples. He felt helpless from all the shouting. He had never seen a person cry like this. When Zhu Maijun cried, she looked like the sky was about to collapse. Hua Tianxian, on the other hand, was like a cannon. "That's enough. Stop arguing." Qi Zhong's ears were buzzing. "Wah!" When Hua Tianxian heard that, she immediately closed her eyes and purposely bawled loudly. The medical staff was sweating profusely when he heard that. He looked at Qi Zhong sympathetically. Qi Zhong's head was about to explode. He had thought that Hua Tianxian was relatively well behaved today. Now, in just a few hours, she had revealed her true colors. Look at how ferocious she looked when she cried. "Don't cry," Qi Zhong said coldly. Hua Tianxian was so angry that she gritted her teeth. After howling, she reached out and pulled Qi Zhong's arm. She opened her mouth and bit him. Qi Zhong's veins were bulging. He groaned. When Hua Tianxian let go of him, he stared at her and said, "Are you done with your revenge? If you're done venting, then shut up. Stop crying. It's ugly and unpleasant to hear." The weather was already hot, and crying made him upset. Hua Tianxian stopped, pursed her lips, and turned her head away with a cold snort. She glanced at Qi Zhong's arm from the corner of her eye, only to see 2 rows of blood vessels on it, a ghastly sight. "That's why I said you're heartless. You didn't even make a sound when you were bitten like that. But don't think that we're even now. Your wound will heal in a few days, but mine is different," Hua Tianxian said again. "I was born in the year of the dog," Qi Zhong said casually and said to the medical staff, "Give me a rabies vaccine later." Just a second ago, Hua Tianxian's anger had subsided a little. Now, she was furious again. She stared at Qi Zhong and said, "Do you dare to hit me? Do you believe that I'll cry all day and kill you?" When Qi Zhong heard this, he felt physically and mentally exhausted, and he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He had never seen someone like her. She was unreasonable, self-righteous, arrogant, domineering, and had the temper of a rich missy. She had all the flaws, but he couldn't hate her. At least she was cuter than Zhu Maijun or Dao Ji. "Alright, you've done well this time. Be careful for the next few days. Try not to walk on the ground," Qi Zhong said sternly. "That's more like it." Hua Tianxian was like a fighting rooster. She raised her head and smiled. Except for the 2 sobs at the beginning, the rest of her sobs were intentional. Therefore, the tears on her face had dried, but her eyes were still wet. Qi Zhong was stunned when he saw this. Once Hua Tianxian was injured, she evolved from a favored concubine to an empress dowager. She sat in the sanitary cart and leisurely swung her other uninjured leg. She even hummed a little tune. She looked like she deserved a beating. Chapter 729. When they returned to the base, the sun was about to set. Along the way, they met many people who suffered from heat stroke. The painful process was definitely unforgettable, but it had to be said that after it was over, there was a sense of accomplishment. Thinking back to the scenery on the road, there was actually some nostalgia. Of course, there was nostalgia, but the idea of starting over did not exist at all. When they returned to the base, it was time for the final conclusion of the military training. Everyone carried a small bench and sat on the training ground. Above them were the school leaders who had come from afar. They praised the students for their perseverance and hard work. The polite and official words made them feel drowsy. On the contrary, the simple and capable words of the instructors made them feel more comfortable. The person who gave the lecture was Qi Zhong, but when Qi Zhong appeared, everyone felt that the instructors here became very excited and respectful. In fact, the students had already noticed before that the instructors of the other classes would be very well behaved every time they saw Qi Zhong. As long as Qi Zhong appeared, the training of the other classes would be more rigorous. Jing Yunjiao knew in his heart that Qi Zhong's military position should not be low. After all the freshmen summed up, the class reunion was left. Dao Ji lost the previous battle, so naturally, she had to go up and make a guarantee. She lowered her head the whole time, as if she was ashamed to see anyone. Not only her, but Ju Jun was also the same. Her face was covered in dirt, as if she had suddenly become an old person. And when A07 won the battle, Qi Zhong, as the instructor, gave everyone a small gift. The gift was not complicated, it was just a small and exquisite military plate. The surface was shining with a golden light, probably sprinkled with gold powder, but the gold content was not high, so the price was definitely not expensive. This gift made everyone very satisfied. After all, after leaving here, there was no possibility of coming back in the future. It was even possible that they would never see Qi Zhong, the instructor, again. It was impossible not to feel touched in their hearts. At night, the instructor returned all the personal belongings, but the skincare products inside were temporarily useless. The next day, everyone set off. There was a special kind of noise in the campus. After returning, Jing Yunjiao and the others clearly felt that it was a lifetime ago. After all, the past 10 days were too difficult and too strict, and now they were like birds released from the cage. Without the instructor's supervision, they did not even know what to do. The four of them were stunned for a while in the dormitory, staring at each other. Let's go shopping. Jing Xiao, you haven't played in the capital before, right? Why don't I take you out for a walk today? Hua Tianxian was still restless. Your feet aren't suitable for walking, Jing Yunjiao said faintly. I'll ask the driver to pick me up. By the way, my mom's friend's beauty salon should be open soon. Let's go and take care of our skin. Okay. Yarrow Baobao immediately nodded in agreement. After the military training, there was only 1 day of relaxation before classes officially started. If they didn't go out now, they would have to wait for another week. Although they had time after school in the afternoon, they couldn't play too late. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to go back to the dormitory. Jing Yunjiao nodded in agreement. Not long after, Hua Tianxian's private car arrived. The three of them went straight to the newly opened beauty salon. After the car stopped, Hua Tianxian pointed at the beauty salon and said, "We're here. It's quite big." Jing Yunjiao got out of the car. The parking lot was right in front of the beauty salon. Although it was a newly opened shop, it was doing well. However, the prices were probably not low. The people coming in and out were all beautiful women who looked very elegant. Xianlan. Suddenly, a soft murmur came from the surroundings. Jing Yunjiao vaguely heard it and immediately turned to look. However, as soon as she turned around, the other person also turned away, so she didn't see the woman's face. Chapter 730. Jing Yunjiao's eyes were filled with suspicion, but she retracted her gaze after some thought. She vaguely heard the woman call out Xianlan, so she must have mistaken her for Old Man Shu's daughter, Shu Xianlan. After all, Old Man Shu's daughter was only 22 or 23 years old when she left the capital, and she looked very similar to her. Old Man Shu had been in a daze for a long time when he first saw her. If it weren't for the age difference, he would have thought that she was his daughter or even granddaughter. What's wrong? Do you know her? Hua Tianxian looked in the direction Jing Yunjiao had been looking and asked. Jing Yunjiao shook her head. No, I don't. I just took a look out of curiosity. Isn't it just a woman? What's there to be curious about? Even if you're curious, you should be curious about the woman inside. My mother's friend has a lot of connections and owns a few beauty salons. Of course, that's not the most important thing. This woman was a big celebrity when she was young, but she suddenly stopped acting and went abroad. She only came back a few years ago. She's very beautiful. Hua Tianxian smiled. Are you talking about Shen Tong? Ren Xingyue asked. Yes, that's her. Let's go. I'll introduce you to her. She's very friendly. If it weren't for the driver supporting Hua Tianxian would have been sent flying. Jing Yunjiao smiled and walked in as well. At this moment, the woman who had her back turned was staring at Jing Yunjiao's back, her face pale. Madam, what's wrong? The driver asked hurriedly. No, nothing. The woman took a few breaths and hurriedly opened the car door. I'm not going in. Let's go home. Madam, Are you not feeling well? Didn't you just say that you wanted to take care of Miss Shen's business? Shut up. Go back immediately. The woman gritted her teeth and snarled. That face was 50 to 60% similar to Xu Shenlan's. The outline, eyes, lips. The only difference was that Xu Xianlan loved to smile and had shallow dimples on her face. On the other hand, the girl just now had a cold expression and a heroic spirit. She knew that it wasn't Xu Xianlan, and it couldn't be her. The moment Jing Yunjiao entered the beauty salon, she could smell a faint fragrance that could soothe the nerves and relax the mind. The smell wasn't too strong either. It seemed like the owner of this beauty salon was indeed very considerate. Xiana. Less than 2 minutes after they entered, a woman walked over. She looked at Hu Tianxian in surprise and said, I haven't seen you in a long time because I've been busy with my business. You've become prettier. Hu Tianxian said intimately, Aunt Tong, you're really giving me face. My face is so dark that it's beyond recognition. How did I become prettier? Oh, what's wrong with your leg? Shen Tong looked at her leg with concern. Hu Tianxian pursed her lips and smiled. It's nothing. I just sprained my ankle during military training. But Aunt Tong, your place is really well decorated. The style is simple and elegant, but it doesn't lose its elegance. No wonder your business is so good. You're such a sweet talker. Shen Tong laughed and scratched Hu Tianxian's nose. Jing Yunjiao carefully sized up this Auntie Tong. She was about 40 years old and looked very delicate and dignified. Her skin was also well maintained. Her speech was neither slow nor slow, and her voice was very pleasant to the ears. She wore a modern-style cheongsam and only had a jade bracelet on her wrist. Hu Tianxian had always been arrogant and did not hold back when she spoke. However, she became much more obedient in front of Aunt Tong. These are. Shen Tong turned her head and looked at the 3 people. In the end, her eyes fell on Jing Yunjiao. A trace of surprise flashed in her eyes. Xian your friend looks really noble. Chapter 731. Jing Yunjiao smiled politely. Hu Tianxian held onto Shen Tong's arm and said, Aunt Tong, let me introduce you. This is Jing Yunjiao. Beside her are Yarrow Baobao and Ren Xingyue. They are all my roommates. Aunt Tong, you have sharp eyes. When I first saw Jing Yunjiao, I also felt that she had a noble aura. She was like the daughter of a famous family. This was a tactful way of explaining to Shen Tong that Jing Yunjiao came from an ordinary family. She was not what she imagined. Shen Tong was not stupid. With Hu Tianxian's reminder, she naturally did not ask who Jing Yunjiao's parents were to avoid any awkwardness. Hello, Aunt Tong. Jing Yunjiao and the other 2 greeted her with a smile. Shen Tong nodded and responded, You are all Xiana's friends. Don't be shy. I will get someone to bring you to your rooms. It was a special 4-person room. Soon, a nurse came in to serve them. They all chose skin whitening products and rested peacefully on the bed. Great Immortal, you and Xingxing seem to know this Aunt Tong. Was she a celebrity in the past? Yarrow Baobao asked. We are young, so we don't know much about her. However, if it was our parents' generation, almost everyone knew her. She was a household name. Aunt Tong was very beautiful when she was young. She acted in a few classic movies. However, Aunt Tong later retired from acting and went abroad for the sake of her child. I heard that when she retired from the entertainment industry, many people went crazy for her, Hu Tianxian said as she closed her eyes and enjoyed herself. Then her family must be very happy now, right? To be able to marry a woman like Aunt Tong, the man must be very impressive. Jing Yunjiao could not help but ask. Hu Tianxian smiled and said, You guessed wrong. No one knows who the man who made Aunt Tong pregnant is. I have seen her son before. His name is Shen Hong. He should be 21 years old this year. He's very handsome. Aunt Tong used to ask me to be her daughter-in-law. Unfortunately, I've only met Shen Hong 2 or 3 times. The last time I saw him was a few years ago. I don't know if his personality has changed, so I can't be his daughter-in-law, Hu Tianxian continued. Jing Yunjiao was a little surprised. Shen Tong looked like an extremely conservative and traditional woman. The cheongsam she wore was the kind that was not ostentatious and looked very gentle. It was hard to imagine that she had given birth to a child out of wedlock. However, since it was something that had nothing to do with her, she stopped being curious. At this time, Shen Tong was standing outside the beauty salon and looking around. She didn't see the person she was looking for, so she said to the security guard in disappointment, "Didn't you see my sister? Mrs. Xu just arrived, but she seemed to have something to do and left in a panic," the security guard said. Shen Tong was a little puzzled. Just as she was about to call to ask about the situation, her phone rang with a text message. She looked at it and saw the simple words, "I have something to do. I'll come back tomorrow." She pursed her lips and smiled. She relaxed and went to take care of the other customers. However, just as she turned around and was about to go upstairs, the door suddenly opened and there was a commotion. When she turned around, she saw a big man pouncing directly at Shen Tong. "Shen Tong, Tong Tong, I've waited for you for more than 20 years. You're still as beautiful as before," the big man said. As he spoke, he had already reached out to hug Shen Tong. The security guard saw this and quickly stepped forward to stop him. However, the big man seemed to have gone crazy. He grabbed Shen Tong and refused to let go. He even put his head on Shen Tong's face. Several security guards were unable to pull him away. More importantly, Shen Tong was in her hands, so the security guards did not dare to be too harsh. The first floor instantly became chaotic. Some women were so frightened that they screamed. Chapter 732. Jing Yunjiao immediately sat up. The room was soundproof, so no one else heard anything. They were still confused. "Did you have a nightmare?" Hu Tianxian deliberately smiled. Jing Yunjiao took off the mask on his face, wiped his hands, and was about to leave. "Something seems to have happened downstairs. It's very noisy." "Noisy? I didn't hear anything." Yarrow Baobao was confused. "Me too." Ren Xingyue nodded. Hu Tianxian had already gotten out of bed with a mask on her face. "Who cares? I'll go down and take a look." "Oh right, you two don't have to go. It's useless anyway." This was Auntie Tong's place, so she had to put in some effort. She couldn't just pretend that nothing happened when Jing Yunjiao heard her and ignore her, right? Moreover, even though Jing Yunjiao was a strange person, her words were always accurate to the point of making people speechless. This time, it was probably the same. By the time Hu Tianxian left, Jing Yunjiao had already rushed downstairs. All she saw was a large man hugging Auntie Tong, touching and kissing her. It was extremely disgusting. Because his arm was currently wrapped around Auntie Tong's neck, the other security guards could only watch from afar and not act rashly. "Don't come over. I'm just chatting with my Tong Tong. If you dare to stop me from being with Tong Tong, I'll make her accompany me. We'll die together." The burly man pointed at the security guards and threatened. Shen Tong's face was ugly. She turned her head and tried to avoid being touched by the burly man. However, she was also flustered and anxious. She was crying. Jing Yunjiao looked and took the small incense bottle hanging on the wall. He directly smashed it at the back of the burly man's head. With a bang, the man's eyes rolled back and he fainted on the spot. However, due to the pull, even Shen Tong was about to fall to the ground. At the crucial moment, Jing Yunjiao stepped forward bravely and reached out to pull him up by the waist, supporting him to the side. "Are you all right?" Jing Yunjiao asked with a serious expression. Shen Tong was shocked. Her body was trembling and her eyes were red. After she felt that she had escaped from the demon's grasp, she let out a sigh of relief. I'm fine. Thank you so much." If it wasn't for Jing Yunjiao just now, even if she could turn around and subdue this big man, the grievances she suffered wouldn't be able to offset. That person was a lunatic. His hands had almost touched her thighs. If she delayed any longer, she didn't dare to imagine what would happen next. "That's good. But who is this man? One of your former followers?" Jing Yunjiao released his hand from Shen Tong's waist and walked in front of the burly man. He kicked him and looked at him for a moment before asking. "Should be. It's not the first time since I came back. Shentong's eyes dimmed and she smiled bitterly. When she became famous, she was only 16 or 17 years old. That was indeed her most glorious time. No matter where she went, she was surrounded by people. However, it was destined to be a flash in the pan. She had been in the entertainment industry for 4 years. When she was 20 years old and her career was at its peak, she got pregnant. Although she could have aborted the child, many of the techniques were not mature at that time. She couldn't go to a big hospital. Moreover, the child was innocent, so she could only choose to keep it. Fortunately, she didn't regret that choice. However, she didn't expect that after 22 years, there would still be someone who remembered her and even used such a method. What happened before? Jing Yunjiao asked in surprise. When I just came back, a fan saw me on the road. He suddenly rushed over and said that he wanted to die with me. That way, I wouldn't have suddenly disappeared. Fortunately, I was lucky and dodged. Otherwise, I would have been in a car accident. Chapter 733. After saying all this, Shentong's expression turned a little ugly as she sighed faintly. On the other hand, Jing Yunjiao was so shocked that she couldn't speak. Even if she liked a celebrity, it shouldn't be to this extent, right? To die together. How was that possible? Although she didn't know much about the entertainment industry, she knew that many celebrities would forget about them after disappearing for a year or so. Shentong had disappeared for nearly 20 years and only returned to the country 3 years ago. Xiao Haiqing would definitely enter the entertainment industry in the future. Hopefully, her luck wouldn't be so bad. If she met such a fan, she would really be sad. Aunt Tong, why don't I ask my mom to investigate this stinky man and his family? Let's see if he still dares to do this in the future. Hu Tianxian was also shocked and rushed over. Forget it, just send this person to the police. Forget about his family. Oh right, it's all thanks to your classmate. She threw the incense bottle very accurately. Otherwise, your Aunt Tong wouldn't have the face to see anyone. Shentong sighed. Hu Tianxian smiled proudly. Our Jing Xiao'er is a 10th ring expert. During military training, she hit the bullseye every time. When she left, the instructor was reluctant to let her go. He cried until his nose was running and he wanted her to stay in the army. Jing Yunjiao's mouth twitched. Hu Tianxian and Qi Zhong's conflict wouldn't end just like that. Really? That's amazing. Shentong's eyes lit up. She looked at Jing Yunjiao with deep gratitude. Hu Tianxian looked at her and said, Aunt Tong, don't tell me you've been seduced by him too? I saw it. Just now, Jing Xiao'er was still hugging your waist. Your eyes were about to pop out red hearts. Can't I give you a word of advice? Jing Xiao'er is a romantic seed. How many girls have been charmed by him, but he didn't even give them any face. Phut, Shentong laughed. You child, you only know how to talk nonsense. The corners of Jing Yunjiao's mouth twitched, and he looked innocent. Calling her a playboy was an injustice. Everyone knew that she was not good at getting along with people, especially not taking the initiative. Most of the people around her were people who came to her door, and she was only responsible for accepting them. However, Shentong looked much more relaxed after hearing Hu Tianxian's words. Not long after, the security guard took the man away to the police station. The noise in the room finally stopped. Aunt Tong, you just said that you've met this kind of person more than once. Could it be that it's not a coincidence, but a deliberate arrangement by someone? Jing Yunjiao thought for a moment and suddenly asked. When he said that, Shentong and the people around him were stunned. Jing Yunjiao, you're really good at conspiracy theories. You think that everyone has bad intentions, and now you're actually trying to scare Auntie Shen. Isn't that too much? A familiar voice suddenly sounded from the side. Jing Yunjiao turned his head and saw that it was Ju Maijun. There was another woman standing next to her. They looked similar to her, so they should be mother and daughter. In that case, this woman should be Ren Xingyue's aunt. Ren Xingyue's aunt was divorced, and Ju Maijun was the child of her aunt and her ex-husband. Therefore, the two girls were not related by blood. You really are everywhere. You're like a ghost that just won't go away. Hu Tianxian snorted. You can come, but I can't. It's true that we're not very close to Auntie Shen, but since Auntie Shen invited us, my mother and I are honored guests here. Can't we even say a few words of fairness? Moreover, although the incident just now was targeted at Auntie Shen, we guests should also be frightened. Are we here to relax or to seek excitement? Chapter 734. Ju Maijun held her head high and puffed out her chest confidently. Her eyes were full of contempt, as if she finally had the ability to compete with Jing Yunjiao. As soon as Aunt Tong heard this, she knew that this child didn't get along with Jing Yunjiao. She immediately said, "Today's matter is my fault. I've frightened everyone. How about this? I'll waive the bill for all of you. Everyone is my old friend. There's no need to be unhappy about it, right?" There weren't many people on the first floor, so she could afford to spend this money. Besides, this beauty salon was a place where money was poured in every day. She, Shen Tong, hadn't been idle all these years abroad. She might not be as rich as these rich people, but she still had some financial resources. Auntie Shen, I'm not blaming you. It's just that I don't agree with Jing Yunjiao's words. She even said that someone was purposely looking for trouble with you. It's really funny. If what she said was true, then wouldn't everyone who knows Auntie Shen be suspicious? My mother and I don't want to be the scapegoat. Ju Maijun said again. Ha. You're the one who put the pot of shit on your face. Other people don't think so. Hu Tianxian immediately scorned. While they were arguing, Yarrow Baobao and Ren Xingyue also came down. Ren Xingyue saw Ju Maijun and her daughter, and her face immediately darkened. She looked at the woman and called, "Auntie." Ju Maijun took her stepfather's surname and also entered the Ju family. According to the law, Ren Xingyue and Ju Maijun were cousins. There was no doubt. Mother Ju's body was a little plump, but not too much. Her upper body was a little shocking. Although she was old, she was still a little beautiful. "Xingyue, why are you here?" Mother Ju said. "Mom, do you still need to say it?" Xingyue hooked up with this Miss Hua of unknown background and found a new friend. "Naturally, she doesn't like me," Ju Maijun said with a willful face. She really didn't know Hua Tianxian's background. After all, she had never met her before. But from the surface, Hua Tianxian's family was still doing well. As for whether it could be compared with the Ju family, she certainly wasn't sure. "Auntie, they are my roommates. Please tell Maijun to mind her words," Ren Xingyue said. As soon as she said this, Mother Ju's face turned cold. "Xingyu, it's not that I want to criticize you, but your uncle spent money to let you go to school, not to let you make some messy friends. A university's tuition fee is a lot of money a year. Your father doesn't care about you, and your mother is no longer around. Your uncle's kindness to you is not small, right? Don't be blinded by lard and go against your uncle, okay? Isn't that so? Dad has spent so much money. It would be a pity if he couldn't get it back in the end." Ju Maijun laughed. At this moment, he felt that all his vexation had disappeared. This wasn't the military training base. There was no need to listen to the instructor. That instructor only knew how to protect people like Jing Yunjiao and made her suffer one loss after another. But it was different now. In the outside world, Ren Xingyue was a wretched girl who lived under someone else's roof and didn't care about her. As for Jing Yunjiao, he was just a country bumpkin. How could he compare with her? What did he have to compare with her? That's right. The one who helped Xingyue was at least her biological uncle, someone who is related by blood. If even someone like that has to know how to repay a debt of gratitude, then Miss Ju, you should understand this even more. You keep calling him dad, but in the end, don't be heartless and do something that would let your dad down, Jing Yunjiao suddenly said. Chapter 735. During the military training, Jing Yunjiao heard from Ren Xingyue that Ju Meijuan's biological father was an alcoholic who abused her. Ju Maijun suffered a lot with her biological father when she was young. After her mother remarried, She wanted to stay with her biological father, who knew that she would refuse and run to the Ju family to beg, which softened Father Ju's heart. At that time, Ju Mai-jun was about 12 or 13 years old. Ren Xingyue grew up in the Ju family. In terms of kinship, she was naturally better than Ju Mai-jun. However, even if they were related by blood, sometimes it couldn't be compared to the wife's pillow talk. Father Ju was a weak man. Therefore, after a long time, Father Ju treated Ju Mai-jun and Ren Xingyue the same. Sometimes, he even felt that Ren Xingyue wasn't like a girl and wasn't as considerate as Ju Mai-jun. When he heard Ren Xingyue say this, Jing Yunjiao thought of Xiao Haiqing's past. If her biological father was like this, then what about her uncle? Now that Jing Yunjiao had finished speaking, Ju Mai-jun glared at him and said, Jing Yunjiao, I know you have a sharp tongue, but this is our Ju family's business. It has nothing to do with you. Mind your own business. Your Ju family? You're just a halfway daughter with no blood relations. You really think you're something, Jing Yunjiao said contemptuously. It wasn't that they didn't have any feelings for each other. It was just that in her opinion, Father Ju was Ju Meijuan's backer. They didn't have much of a father-daughter relationship, but there were many feelings of using her. Ju Mai-jun stared at Jing Yunjiao like a venomous snake. After a few seconds, she suddenly smiled and said, no matter how hard you talk and how noble you look, you can't get rid of the fact that you're a country bumpkin. Take the things here for example. If it wasn't for Hua Tianxian, would you be able to afford them? Oh, by the way, you came here in Hua Tianxian's car, right? If it wasn't for her, you probably wouldn't have seen such a luxury car, right? You're just a dog relying on its master's power. Do you really think you're so great? Ju Mai-jun mocked. Enough. Shen Tong suddenly shouted coldly, Miss Ju, Jing Yunjiao is my esteemed guest, you better watch your mouth. Auntie Shen, this is a high-end beauty salon. Isn't this a roadside hairdresser or massage parlor where anyone can enter? She's an orphan without parents. Everything she eats and wears is given to her by others. We don't even know if she has lice on her body. How can such a person stay with us? Ju Mai-jun continued chattering. Jing Yunjiao's eyes darkened. Aunt Tong, I see that half of the houses next to your beauty salon are still empty. Why? Jing Yunjiao suddenly changed the topic and asked. Shen Tong was taken aback. Oh, it's like this. You can see it too. There's a shopping center across the road. The location is great. After I bought the houses here, I negotiated with the people next to it and spent a lot of money and effort to convince them to sell it. In the future, I'm planning to expand the beauty salon and add a fitness center and a place to drink tea and chat. However, I just spent a lot of money on 2 houses, so I'll have to wait for a while. She didn't like renting. It was troublesome and unpredictable. She would rather spend more money. With a business to rely on, it would be easier in the future. The beauty salon wasn't small. It was around 600 square meters. The decorations were luxurious, and it was located on the shopping street. The price was definitely exorbitant. Not to mention, there was another house of the same size next to it. It was needless to say how much money it would cost. Aunt Tong, do you accept investment? I won't participate in the management of the beauty salon. I'll just give you some dividends every year, Jing Yunjiao suddenly said. Chapter 736. This beauty salon was high-end, and the decorations were even more luxurious. All the equipment and cosmetics used inside were more expensive than gold. It wasn't something that could be bought with hundreds of thousands or even millions of yuan. Otherwise, Shen Tong would have already bought the neighboring salon. The air in Jingju was filled with the smell of money. Shen Tong's beauty salon was very different from others. Although the investment was ridiculously high, the income was also very considerable. Some of the women here only needed a few hundred yuan for one session, while others needed thousands or even tens of thousands of yuan. There were even some who had to take care of every pore from head to toe. When Jing Yunjiao said that he wanted to invest, Shen Tong was dumbfounded. She was indeed short of money. When she bought these 2 houses, she spent a lot of money and even owed the bank some money. However, after all, it wasn't easy to buy the house next door. It was better than letting others snatch it away. Even if she couldn't use it for the time being, it was still good to rent it to others in the future. However, she didn't expect Jing Yunjiao to say that he wanted to invest. If it was true, she would be more than happy to, but, Jing Yunjiao, I know. I said that you're a country bumpkin, so you want to slap my face. However, I think you're using the wrong method. Do you think I'll believe you when you say that you want to invest? People care about their face, and trees care about their bark. I'm really shocked that you would say such things for your own face. Ju Maijun laughed. In her heart, she was simply disgusted. He actually said that he wanted to invest. Did he know how much it would cost? Aunt Tong? Jing Yunjiao ignored Ju Maijun and stared at Shen Tong. When she first arrived, she noticed the house next door. When she came in, she also heard the waiter mention it in a low voice. Otherwise, she wouldn't have spoken so rashly. As for Shen Tong's character, Jing Yunjiao wasn't worried because he could tell from Hua Tianxian's reaction. Hua Tianxian had always been arrogant, but her eyesight was excellent. If there was a problem with Shen Tong's character, with Hua Tianxian's intelligence, it was impossible for her not to notice it. Moreover, even if Shen Tong's character was ordinary, it wouldn't be a problem. Since it was an investment, there would be no shortage of contracts. It was only related to benefits, not personal matters. If there's an investment, of course, I will consider it. Shen Tong was a little confused. She rubbed her head and even felt that she might be old and couldn't keep up with this little girl's thoughts. That's good, Jing Yunjiao pursed her lips and smiled. After speaking, she took out a stack of blank checks from her bag and started writing. After writing, she stuffed it into Shen Tong's hand. 10 million. If it's not enough, I will add more. In the future, I will trouble Aunt Tong to take care of me. Of course, from today onwards, this mother and daughter pair will be banned from entering the house. Is that okay? This check belonged to Yu Ling Wines. It was stamped with Yu Ling Wines and Pak Yuan's seal, so there was no problem. She gave this check to Shen Tong in front of so many people, so she wasn't worried that she would go back on her word. Jing Yunjiao moved quickly and glanced at Ju Maijun faintly. Miss Ju, the term country bumpkin is not differentiated by region, but by brain. Miss Ju, I'm afraid your brain is filled with idiots. Even if you are born rich, your standards are still so low that it's disgusting. After speaking, she said, why? Do you still want to verify whether this check is real or fake? There's a bank nearby. I don't mind. When she was just reborn, she was short of money. But now, she was rich. Chapter 737. After Yu Ling Wine Company turned the tables in the battle with Zhuo Haiyang, their sales this year would definitely exceed 10 billion. Yu Ling Tea House's sales were a little less, but now the tea leaves were selling very well, and the income was not low. Other than that, there was also Yu Tianxian and the medicinal herbs business from the Medicine Association. In addition, during the 2 years she was in Huaning County, the patients that old man Shu introduced to her earned her a lot of private money. Comparing money? She wasn't afraid of that. After Jing Yunjiao finished speaking, the surroundings were silent. Even Hua Tianxian and Yarrow Baobao were stunned and couldn't react. Ju Meijuan's eyes flashed with deep shock, but she still didn't want to believe it. She said, do you think I'll believe a random check is real? Jing Yunjiao, didn't you say we can go to the bank to verify it? Okay. Then go, it's illegal to write a fake check. Don't blame me for not reminding you. She looked stubborn, but she felt a little guilty. Jing Yunjiao didn't look like he was lying. It seemed like he really could take out the money. 10 million was enough to open a few small to medium-sized beauty salons. This amount of money was not small even in the capital where every inch of land was worth its weight in gold. Dao Ji clearly told her that Jing Yunjiao was born in a small county and that she was an orphan. If that was true, how could Jing Yunjiao take out so much money? The Ju family was not bad. Her stepfather's family was rich compared to ordinary people, but her stepfather was a person who knew how to live. He usually liked to collect paintings and antiques, so he didn't give her a lot of pocket money. Even her mother didn't have much money. It was impossible for her to take out 10 million so casually. Jing Yunjiao snorted softly, his eyes firm. Shentong saw that and knew that Jing Yunjiao wasn't joking. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but after thinking about it, she accepted it and quickly prepared the contract. She had thought about finding someone to invest in before, so the contract was already prepared. Shentong directly invited Jing Yunjiao and the others into a private room to talk. Jing Yunjiao carefully read through the contract, pointed out a few issues, and after making some adjustments, she happily signed it. Everyone was unable to react in time to this situation. If this was an act, then this act was a little too realistic, especially when Jing Yunjiao was frowning as she read the contract carefully. She didn't look like a little girl who didn't know anything at all, but more like a successful person with a bold spirit. The problems she pointed out were also very sharp, making Shentong couldn't help but be even more serious when dealing with them. Naturally, Ju Maijun and her son still didn't believe it. They sneered as if they were sure that the check was fake. After negotiating the contract, Ju Maijun and her son proudly followed Shentong and the others to a nearby bank. The moment they stepped into the bank, even Shentong herself was a little nervous. Although she felt that Jing Yunjiao wouldn't tell such a big lie, Ju Maijun's serious look made it seem like she was really playing along with Jing Yunjiao. "Hello, there is no problem with this check. Would you like to cash it now?" The staff at the counter asked politely. Hearing this, Ju Maijun was dumbfounded. Hua Tianxian and the others breathed a sigh of relief. "That's impossible. Let's see. How can it be real?" Ju Maijun was halfway through her sentence when Hua Tianxian proudly pulled her to the side. "All right, stop acting like a clown. I already said that the check is real. There should be a limit to your nonsense, right?" Saying that her bracelet was fake in front of so many people, wasn't it the same as saying that she, Mrs. Ju, was no different from an imposter? Although the Ju family wasn't a famous family, they didn't need her to wear fake agarwood. Jing Yunjiao's words made them lose face. Moreover, Mrs. Ju had spent money to buy this wooden skewer for her own brother. She had never liked gold and jade. She felt that it was too tacky, so she thought of using a wooden skewer. It also had a fragrance and looked elegant. "Jing Yunjiao, you better make yourself clear." The mother and daughter immediately blocked Jing Yunjiao's path. Jing Yunjiao smiled lightly. "This is the first time I've seen someone looking for trouble. Do you really want to hear what I have to say? Don't try to scare me. Do you know how much I spent on this bracelet? How dare you say it's fake?" Mrs. Ju said angrily. "Money has nothing to do with authenticity." Jing Yunjiao mocked and continued, "If you don't believe me, you can take the bracelet off and burn it. See if it smells really bad." Chapter 739. The so-called agarwood bracelet could be divided into dead and living ones. After the agarwood tree died, it was buried in soil and flooded with water. After hundreds of years of corrosion, the remaining part was called agarwood, which was also known as dead agarwood. This type of agarwood was extremely rare and expensive. As for living agarwood, it was a bracelet made directly from the agarwood tree. Regardless of whether it was dead or living, it would definitely be fragrant after being smoked. However, the bracelet in Mrs. Ju's hand, although there was only one additional word, was very different. There is a type of tree that grows along the border of China. The tree species is the same as agarwood, but the only difference is that agarwood slowly forms oil due to the destructive conditions of the outside world, while the dead agarwood forms oil naturally during its growth period. Of course, the dead agarwood also has a fragrance. The smell and appearance are the same as agarwood, but a fake is a fake. After the dead agarwood is burned, the difference will immediately become apparent, just like the smell of burning plastic, and the smoke stains will be ink black, Jing Yunjiao said faintly, his tone clear and clear. As he spoke, his entire body shone brightly. Halfway through, he paused and looked at her with a scrutinizing expression. With a smile, he said, "But Mrs. Ju, I see that you don't seem to care about the authenticity of the bracelet. No one will do anything to you even if you bring the dead agarwood around. Moreover, you spent a lot of money to buy it, so how could you bear to burn it? So, I'm just saying. Whether you listen to me or not has nothing to do with me, Jing Yunjiao said deliberately. Jing Yunjiao was not lying. Nothing was absolute. Although the smell was the same, it still depended on the person who smelled it. If she could not even tell the difference between the dead agarwood and the agarwood, Old Man Shu would probably die of anger. However, after Jing Yunjiao said that, regardless of what Mrs. Ju said, Hu Tianxian and the others could only treat it as a fake. Even if Jing Yunjiao's words were vague and unsubstantiated, and sounded like a bluff, it was a pleasure for them to provoke someone they hated. Mrs. Ju's face was frighteningly cold. The bracelet cost hundreds of thousands, which was not a small amount. She had to please her husband for an entire day before he agreed to give her the money. Now, she was wearing a bracelet that was worth hundreds of thousands, but someone said that it was fake. Shen Tong was also here. If she were to spread the news, she believed that it wouldn't take long for everyone in the circle to know that she had brought a fake. Even if it was real, no one would believe her. You're talking nonsense. Jing Yunjiao, are you saying that my bracelet is fake? Okay, I'll burn this bracelet now. If it's real, what will you do? Mrs. Ju roared. How am I? What a joke. What does your bracelet have to do with me? Jing Yunjiao suddenly became shameless. It was just a casual remark. Did he have to take it seriously? Wasn't Ju Maijun the same? Since that was the case, why did she have to pay the price for these few words of truth? When Jing Yunjiao said this, Mrs. Ju felt extremely stifled. How could there be such an annoying girl? Sure enough, birds of a feather flocked together. None of Ren Xingyue's friends were good people. Xiao is what you said true? Hu Tianxian couldn't help but ask. Of course it's true. Jing Yunjiao smiled gently. When Hu Tianxian heard this, the corners of her mouth curled up slightly. She looked at the mother and daughter of the Ju family and said, how about this, you burn this bracelet. If it doesn't smell like what Jing Yunjiao said, I'll pay for it. But if it's really like what she said, you can pay 100,000. How about that? Do you want to bet? Ever since she came back from the military base, she had fallen in love with this kind of gambling drama. Especially when it involved Jing Yunjiao, she would definitely win. Chapter 740. Mrs. Ju looked hesitant, but she was unwilling to refuse. It wasn't that she couldn't afford 100,000 yuan. Although her husband didn't approve of her spending a few 100,000 yuan on the bracelet, he still gave her a lot of money every month. Most importantly, she could prove that her bracelet was real and Jing Yunjiao and the others wouldn't have anything to say. Otherwise, how could she go out and socialize in the future? Besides, if the bracelet was burned, the little girl would pay for it. In front of so many people, she couldn't go back on her word. She had asked her own brother to buy it, so how could it be fake? Mrs. Ju sneered, okay, Jing Yunjiao, you'll know that you should keep a low profile. Don't talk nonsense all the time. Jing Yunjiao pursed her lips and smiled, her expression cold and arrogant. Mrs. Ju immediately took out the bracelet, but after all, they were outside the bank. There were too many people and it didn't look good, so she went back to the beauty salon to sit down and talk. One or cut off a piece and burn it. There's no need to waste it. Jing Yunjiao saw Mrs. Ju put the whole bracelet on a plate and said. It wasn't that she was thinking for Mrs. Ju, but she clearly knew that the mother and daughter of the Ju family were very calculative. After they verified that the agarwood was fake, the ones left behind would definitely make Mrs. Ju furious. What was the point of burning them all? As soon as she said that, Ju Maijun immediately pulled off a piece. What a joke! This thing was worth a lot of money. Wouldn't it be a pity to burn it all for no reason? Jing Yunjiao's eyes were smiling as she casually sat on the sofa. After a while, the waiter came back with a fire sauce. Under everyone's gaze, she reached out to the agarwood. Mrs. Ju and her daughter's eyes were wide open. Their expressions were serious, but even so, there was still a lot of confidence in their eyes. The agarwood contained oil, so it was easy to ignite. After a while, there was a crackling sound and a flame appeared. At the same time, the air was instantly filled with a foul smell. The smell was so pungent that everyone covered their mouths and noses. Although agarwood was not commonly seen, everyone knew the characteristics of agarwood. When burned, it would definitely not emit such a horrible and disgusting smell. Hu Tianxian narrowed her eyes and smiled. 100,000 yuan was not much to her, but it was a good sign. Moreover, she could see the mother and daughter's exasperated expressions. How funny was that? Bang! Mrs. Ju slammed her hand on the table. That's impossible. My brother bought it for me. It can't be fake. Did you put something dirty in here? Her brother wouldn't lie to her, right? Something worth hundreds of thousands. Haha, you still have so many beads left in your hands. If you don't believe me, you can burn them one by one. Jing Yunjiao laughed coldly. Her gaze landed on Mrs. Ju's shocked and somewhat angry expression, and she purposely said, "So it turns out that the item was personally bought by your younger brother. As the saying goes, it's hard to guard against thieves day and night. Looks like Mrs. Ju needs to discipline the people around you. Otherwise, even if you can blame the fake item on your younger brother this time, what about the next time? I don't know if your brother is willing to bear this dirty water." In the beginning, Mrs. Ju was very sure that what she said was true. The item should have been given by someone she trusted the most. However, Jing Yunjiao's words were purposely said to make Mrs. Ju look like an evil older sister who lost a bet and acted shamelessly. She couldn't voice out her grievances. When she went back, she would definitely be at odds with her brother. This Mrs. Ju was so annoying. How could she be satisfied if she didn't cause trouble for her? Chapter 741. Mrs. Ju's face was full of unwillingness. She took out 2 beads in succession and tested them again. However, it turned out that they were still stinky. Her face was livid with anger. At this moment, just as Jing Yunjiao thought, Mrs. Ju resented her own brother in her heart. At that time, she thought that gold and jade were too vulgar. It was her brother who told her that the agarwood bracelet was good and that he could buy it from someone else for her. At that time, her brother was sincere and even said that many people wanted this bracelet and he had a good relationship with the seller, so he could buy it for her. At that time, she thought that her brother cared about her sister, but she didn't expect that he would give her a fake bracelet. This thing was called Dead Man Heavy. Just hearing it made her feel unlucky. At this time, Mrs. Ju felt that there was a gloomy feeling all over her body, as if something unclean was staring at her. She was extremely uncomfortable. The stinky smell in the air gave her goosebumps. She pinched her nose angrily and stood up in disgust. She turned around and was about to leave in exasperation. Hu Tianxian opened her eyes and said faintly behind her, "Mrs. Ju, did you forget something?" Hearing this, Mrs. Ju threw the 100,000 yuan from her bag directly onto the sofa. When they agreed to make a bet, both parties had already withdrawn their money. This was to prevent them from going back on their word. Hu Tianxian wasn't angry at all and happily took the money in her hands. She gave a portion of it to Jing Yunjiao. "You take half, I'll take half. It's all thanks to you that I can earn more pocket money. The next time there's something good like this, you have to call me." Who wouldn't be willing to participate in this kind of gambling that was bound to win? Mrs. Ju was so angry that her temples were throbbing. She glared at Jing Yunjiao fiercely and dragged Ju Maijun out of the beauty salon in her high heels. As soon as Mrs. Ju and her daughter left, several people became more lively in an instant. "Jing Jing, you are so handsome." Ju Maijun's eyes almost popped out just now. "Did you see how funny her expression was when she stared at the stack of money in your hands? Her heart must have ached to death," Yarrow Baobao said with a look of worship. Shentong was also very surprised. "I originally thought that you were deliberately making them angry and joking, but I didn't expect it to be true. It's indeed impressive, but how did you know that it wasn't agarwood? Furthermore, you previously said that its appearance and taste were the same as agarwood. I'm more sensitive to these things that can be used as medicinal herbs, so I can distinguish them," Jing Yunjiao said. Shun Tong nodded and took out the check and contract. These, Aunt Tong, I'm not joking with you. If you need investment, please accept the money. It's beneficial to both of us, Jing Yunjiao said. Well, as an investor, I will report to you regularly about the situation of the beauty salon. I won't let you spend this money for nothing, Shun Tong said with a smile. In her heart, she became more and more curious about Jing Yunjiao. The girl in front of her looked a little mysterious, and her temperament would make people's eyes light up. However, Ju Mai-jun had said that she was an orphan and a country bumpkin. Aunt Tong is a very trustworthy person. You can rest assured. Hua Tianxian looked generous. But I remember that you said that you would treat us to a meal before. Since we made so much money today, I won't be polite later. Jing Yunjiao smiled helplessly and nodded. You can choose the place. Hua Tianxian raised her eyebrows and beamed with joy. She originally thought that Jing Yunjiao's family wasn't very well off, so she thought that even if Jing Yunjiao really wanted to treat her, she would restrain herself a little. Who knew that she would actually give her 10 million yuan in one go? She was even more generous than her. It seemed that she didn't need to worry at all. Chapter 742. Previously, when they interacted with Jing Yunjiao, the other three had been cautious. After all, although Jing Yunjiao didn't look like he was in need of money, he was still an orphan. It was reasonable to say that he might be in need of money. Therefore, whether it was when they were chatting or when they went out this time, they were prepared to restrain themselves. They didn't want to bring up things that Jing Yunjiao hadn't come into contact with, which would cause him to feel awkward. However, things were different now. It wasn't that there was a difference between having more money and not having enough money. It was just that they didn't have to worry about it anymore. If it was in the past, talking about those expensive things from time to time would more or less make them seem like they were showing off. However, Jing Yunjiao didn't lack those things at all. When he talked about it, he felt a little unrestrained. The four of them were interrupted halfway through their treatment. However, after being delayed for so long, they didn't have the mood to continue with the beauty treatment. They might as well save the rest of their time on other things and eat and drink together outside. However, the cost wasn't that high. Jing Yunjiao wasn't a wasteful person at all. He didn't care about the price of anything, only the comfort. Therefore, they went to a mid-range restaurant. As for Hua Tianxian, she had a strong ability to accept things, so she didn't care about these things. Hua Tianxian suddenly asked in the middle of eating, "Oh right, I have a question that I've always wanted to ask you. It's about Qi Zhong. Before he brought me to the sanitarium, he called you sister-in-law. Is that right?" Jing Yunjiao almost spat out the mouthful of rice in his mouth. You might have misheard. Jing Yunjiao was a little embarrassed. Really? Hua Tianxian raised her eyebrows. Jing you don't seem like someone who likes to lie. Don't you know that your ears are red? I think I heard it at that time, but I was worried about the great immortal, so I forgot to mention it. Jing, it's definitely right. He definitely called you sister-in-law, Yarrow Baobao said with a look of certainty. The corner of Jing Yunjiao's mouth twitched. Tell me, who's that bro? However, Qi Zhong was an insufferably arrogant and chauvinistic man. To be able to make him call someone big brother, they were either related by blood, or that man could crush him in terms of strength or intelligence. But no matter which one it is, he should be at least 8 or 9 years older than us, right? Celestial Immortal Hua said slowly as she tapped her chopsticks against the plate. Li Xiaoyun was 26 or 27 years old now. That was indeed true. As for his skills and intelligence, actually, she didn't know much about him because Li Xiaoyun had hidden himself very well. During his time in Huaning County, he had been trying to keep a low profile. Chapter 743. Hua Tianxian knew when to stop joking. After observing Jing Yunjiao's expression for a while, she didn't ask any more questions. However, looking at Jing Yunjiao's expression, she felt more and more interested. After dinner, the four of them strolled around the streets near a university. Jing Yunjiao bought a lot of daily necessities and finally carried them back to the dormitory. By then, Ju Mai-jun had already returned to school. As for Mrs. Ju, she was fuming at home. Of course, her husband was out socializing and wasn't home. Otherwise, if he found out that she had spent hundreds of thousands on a fake agarwood bracelet, he would no longer trust and praise her brother as much as he did before. "Sis, why did you suddenly call me over? As you know, school has started, and I'm going to be busy preparing for classes for the next 2 days," the man said in annoyance. Mrs. Ju was in her early 40s and her brother was only in his 30s. He was wearing a white shirt and trousers, a pair of gold-rimmed glasses, and a square face. He looked like a knowledgeable person. However, the only flaw was that he had a large mole near his chin, which made him look like a crooked person. Mrs. Ju sat on the sofa and looked up at her brother. Her chest was heaving with anger. She slammed the things in her hands on the coffee table in front of her and said, "Du Rongyang, how long are you going to lie to me?" Du Rongyang was startled. He glanced at the scattered beads on the bracelet and felt a little guilty. "Sis, what do you mean by this? Didn't you take Mai-jun out for a facial today? Why are you suddenly so angry? Don't talk to me about facial. Rongyang, I've been good to you. Now you're even lying to me." Mrs. Ju was shaking with anger. She pointed at the beads and said, "Do you know how humiliated I was today? She said that this thing I was carrying wasn't agarwood at all. It was a dead man's weight. It's fake." Du Rongyang's heart skipped a beat. He laughed dryly and said, "Just because of this. Sis, there are many people who don't know what's what. This thing is obviously real. Who dares to say it's fake? I'll go talk to her." Mrs. Ju snorted and looked at her brother. "You really don't know? Sis, I would never lie to you. Besides, your brother is a university professor. I do things openly. How can I lie?" Cold sweat was about to flow down from his forehead. If he had known that his sister had found out that the item was fake, he would have called Mai-jun in advance to prepare himself. "You still want to argue? I've been humiliated so badly today that I can't even raise my head." Mrs. Ju looked at her younger brother's clueless expression and her anger subsided a little. "You're really too much. You said that it was a good method to ensure the quality of the things. In the end, this thing immediately appeared when it was burned. The smell is terrible. I don't want to go out for the next few days. If my friends ask me why I didn't bring this wooden skewer, I really don't know what to say." Jin Yu was indeed tacky, but at least she wouldn't be unable to distinguish it. That was hundreds of thousands of yuan. An ordinary family would need 20 years to earn that amount. Du Rongyang breathed a sigh of relief in his heart, but he was a little suspicious. Why did his sister suddenly think of using fire to determine whether it was real or fake? "Sis, I just found out. I'm sorry. It's all my fault. I was too careless. I was deceived and made you lose face. How about this? I'll return the money to you. Although my monthly salary isn't much, I'm still a university professor." Du Rongyang looked embarrassed and a little hesitant. Mrs. Ju's heart immediately softened when she saw that. Chapter 744. Their Du family used to be an ordinary working-class family, and their parents were not very educated. Her brother had finally managed to get into a good university and stayed in school to teach. She had also found a good husband, so there was no need to let her brother suffer for a few 100,000. Forget it. You still have a wife and children to raise. It's only a few 100,000. Your brother-in-law isn't greedy for such a small amount of money, so it's nothing to him. However, you have to be more careful next time. After all, you have a reputation to uphold. It's fine if you implicate your sister, but if you implicate others, it won't be good for you," Mrs. Ju said with concern. At this point, Du Rongyang's face turned pale. "Sis, now that you mention it, I remember that I bought a bracelet for a colleague. Did he also realize that the bracelet was fake? What should I do? If he knows, he will definitely ask me to pay for it. He might even let the students know. Then, I will." He panicked and immediately stood up. He paced back and forth like a headless fly. After a few seconds, he said, "No, I can't just sit here and wait. I have to get that colleague to sell the bracelet back to me, but this money. Sigh, forget it. Reputation is more important than money. I have saved up some money over the years. If I think about selling something from the store, I will definitely be able to do it. Sis, this time, it's all thanks to you. Otherwise, I wouldn't have known that the bracelet was fake. That damn old Lee actually lied to me." As he spoke, his trembling hand wiped his sweat with a tissue on the table. He looked a little scared. When Mrs. Ju saw this, she also became anxious for her brother. "Sell what? Your family doesn't have anything to sell, right?" Mrs. Ju immediately asked. Her brother only knew how to study when he was in school. He was an honest person and was often cheated of his money. Later, when he finally got a job, he thought that the hard times were over. However, when he first started working, he was ostracized and had to treat people to meals from time to time. He married a woman from a good family, but that woman had brothers, so she couldn't inherit the family property. She spent most of her time at home playing with the children, so her expenses were high. Furthermore, her brother was afraid of embarrassing her, so he gave her husband cigarettes and alcohol every year. Their life was considered tight. Thinking of this, Mrs. Ju sighed. She turned around and took out a card from her bag. "There's 600,000 here. Your brother-in-law doesn't know about this, so don't tell him. Take this money and buy the bracelet. Just be careful in the future." "Sis, I don't think that's a good idea. I'm always asking for your money." Du Rongyang looked hesitant and touched. "What's wrong with that? If I had known your brother-in-law earlier, you wouldn't still be a shabby professor there. It's natural for you to work in your brother-in-law's company for your major back then. Your future would definitely be better than now." Mrs. Ju also felt that it was a pity and said, "Your sister's wife is very thrifty. Usually, she won't give me a lot of money at once. Otherwise, I'll give you more. Take it well." Du Rongyang was touched, and his voice was a little hoarse. "Sis, it's all thanks to you. All right, you're my younger brother. If I don't help you, who should I help? I called you over in a hurry just now. Now that there's nothing else, you can go back early," Mrs. Ju said with a look of resignation. "Yes." Du Rongyang nodded. His expression was complicated and dignified as he left Mrs. Ju's sight. However, as soon as he left the Ju family's gate and got into the car, the corner of Du Rongyang's mouth curled up. In the blink of an eye, he had earned another 600,000. However, the more rich people were, the more stingy they became. His brother-in-law earned hundreds of millions every year, but he never gave a little to his only brother-in-law. Fortunately, he was smart enough to ask his sister for money. Otherwise, wouldn't he be poor to death? Chapter 745. Du Rongyang put the bank card in his wallet and glanced at the villa outside through the window. He silently started the car and drove away. But on the way, he called Ju Mai-jun. "Mai-jun, I'm your uncle. You have class tomorrow. Did you have fun today?" His voice was full of care and love. Ju Mai-jun had always liked this uncle. When she heard his voice, the resentment in her heart disappeared. She said coquettishly, "Uncle, my mother and I were bullied outside today. It was so infuriating. We were cheated of 100,000 yuan. 100,000 yuan? What happened?" Du Rongyang's voice was cold. In his eyes, his sister's money was also his. 100,000 yuan was nothing to the Ju family, but to him, it was not a small fortune. It was a pity that it was cheated away in a day. "My skin hasn't been very good recently, so I went to the beauty salon with my mother. Who knew that I would meet a few annoying people, especially that Jing Yunjiao. She not only forbade my mother and me from entering the beauty salon, but also said that my mother's bracelet was fake. We made a bet on the spot. Who knew that there was a problem with the bracelet, so we lost 100,000 yuan. I feel indignant just thinking about it." "Oh right, uncle, you bought that bracelet for my mother, right? How could there be a problem?" Ju Mai-jun asked again. When she thought of this, her voice was full of resentment. Du Rongyang was stunned for a moment, then he said apologetically, "It's all Uncle's fault. Uncle was cheated too. Sigh, I'm just a small professor. I don't know much. If I had known, I wouldn't have bought a garwood and pretended to be elegant. Uncle, I don't mean to blame you. I just feel indignant that we suffered such a big loss," Ju Maijun said. "I know. But the Jing Yunjiao you mentioned. Is she a student of University A? That's right, and who knows, Uncle, you might even meet her. I'll tell you in detail when you reach school. In any case, you'll definitely be able to recognize Jing Yunjiao when you see her." The nephew and uncle talked for a while before hanging up. Jing Yunjiao. Du Rongyang murmured softly. He memorized the name and drove in peace. The night of a university was filled with a carnival-like liveliness. A few hours after Jing Yunjiao returned to her dormitory, her phone rang with a message notification. Seeing the few words on the screen, her heart skipped a beat. She got out of bed and went out. "Where are you going so late? It can't be a lover, right?" Celestial Immortal Hua said leisurely with a melon seed in her mouth. Jing Yunjiao's body tensed up. "A friend came to visit me. I'll be back soon. The curfew starts at 11 o'clock. But if you want to sleep outside, it's fine. We're all young people, so we can understand," Hua Tianxian said with a smile. The corners of Jing Yunjiao's mouth twitched as he hurriedly left the room. He didn't want to continue talking nonsense with Hua Tianxian. The message was from Li Xiaoyun, saying that he was waiting for her at the school gate. She hadn't seen him after being in the capital for so long. Naturally, she had to go out and meet him. There were still many people on campus. After all, there was still the freshness of a new student. There were people wandering around and familiarizing themselves with the environment. Jing Yunjiao got closer and closer to the gate. He vaguely saw a few girls pointing outside. He looked over and saw Li Xiaoyun in a light blue shirt and a black windbreaker. He leaned against the front of his car and waited. He held a paper box in his hand. She didn't know what was inside. Chapter 746. Jing Yunjiao was dressed simply in a white shirt and denim shorts. She looked very cool and her legs were straight and slender. "Another one trying to hit on me. This is the 7th one, right?" a girl said when she was 4 or 5 meters away from Li Xiaoyun. "But this girl is very pretty. That handsome guy should talk to her for a while, right? Anyway, if it were me, I would definitely be charmed," another girl said. "That's not necessarily true. This handsome guy is obviously here to wait for someone. How could he possibly pay attention to strangers? Besides, the few girls who hit on him just now should be seniors. All of them were dressed to the nines, but in the end, didn't they just get lost from him?" When Jing Yunjiao heard this, she was slightly surprised. Li Xiaoyun just cursed at a girl? It really didn't seem like something a gentleman like him would do. "Why are you here so late?" Jing Yunjiao smiled at Li Xiaoyun and said. After all, they hadn't seen each other for a long time. Li Xiaoyun came to see her, so her attitude was naturally better. Li Xiaoyun stood up straight and looked at her from head to toe. "It seems that you had a good time during military training. Second brother didn't bully you, did he?" Jing Yunjiao shook her head. "Instructor Qi is a fair person. I'm not a bad child. Why would he bully me?" "Fair?" The corner of Li Xiaoyun's mouth twitched. Indeed, his second brother was the most old-fashioned, strict, and safe one among his brothers. It was precisely because of his personality that he let his second brother be the instructor instead of the other brothers. After all, he didn't want the woman he reserved to be too close to his brothers while he was away. "I heard that you gave away the hemostatic ointment," Li Xiaoyun asked again. As he spoke, Jing Yunjiao vaguely heard the sound of something breaking in the paper box in his hand, as if there was a living thing inside. "I've already discussed it with Qi Zhong, but he said that he still needs to report it to the higher-ups. After all, I've already given him some conditions." After Jing Yunjiao finished speaking, she asked again, "Have you finished the hemostatic medicine I gave you before? If you're done, I have more here. Ah Zhao, you're concerned about whether I'm injured or not, right? Li Xiaoyun's eyes flashed and he said with a faint smile, don't worry. Although it is a little dangerous, I still have the ability to protect myself. But you. As he said that, he reached out and brushed the short hair on her head. What a pity. This hair will take at least a year to grow out. Jing Yunjiao looked very handsome with his short hair, especially when he was wearing a white shirt. He gave off a clean and refreshing feeling. However, although he was handsome, he didn't look like a tomboy. After all, Jing Yunjiao's figure was very pleasant. It was just that his slightly ascetic appearance made his appetite waver. There was a fragrance on Li Xiaoyun's hand, but it was not strong. After rubbing her head twice, he casually withdrew his hand. It was the same every time. It was as if she was a pet. After rubbing his face, he looked cold and indifferent. She was too embarrassed to speak. What's in this paper box? Why does it feel like it's alive? Jing Yunjiao simply scratched his hair twice and tidied it up. He couldn't help but ask. Are you interested? Li Xiaoyun smiled. It's okay. If you don't want to say it, then forget it. After knowing Li Xiaoyun for so long, she knew a little about his temperament. The more curious she was, the more Li Xiaoyun would deliberately pretend to be ignorant. Chapter 747. Li Xiaoyun raised his eyebrows and moved closer. His handsome face was magnified in front of Jing Yunjiao. He said softly, you obviously want to know. Why are you so stubborn? I'm not stubborn. Jing Yunjiao panicked and took a step back. However, her arm was instantly pulled back by Li Xiaoyun. He held the box in one hand and said with a smile, is this what you said? If you're not interested, I'll throw this away. How old is she? From the first time he saw her, Jing Yunjiao was like a little old man. No matter what, she always had a calm appearance. Of course, this was her personality, and it was what he admired. However, he also knew that Jing Yunjiao was just restraining the curiosity of her age to do other things. Most of the time, she had a little girl's squeamishness, but in her eyes, that squeamishness was like timidity. She was afraid that if it leaked out, people would think that she was easy to bully. Therefore, she was like a hedgehog with its hair standing on end. However, in front of him, the pufferfish was cuter. It was better to use the poison to deal with others. When Li Xiaoyun said this, he tilted his hand. The box seemed to be slipping from his hand. Jing Yunjiao saw and immediately reached out to help. Is there a living thing inside? It will break if it falls to the ground. Ah Zhao, why are you so cute? Li Xiaoyun suddenly smiled. He glanced around and pushed the box in front of her. This is a university gift for you. Open it and see. For me. Jing Yunjiao was stunned. Is it a puppy or a kitten? See for yourself. Jing Yunjiao was a little hesitant. Under the streetlights, the tips of her ears were a little hot. She never thought that she would receive a gift from Li Xiaoyun. Even though many people had sent her congratulatory gifts when she became the top scorer, most of them were formal gifts for students. None of them were for pets. However, she was really curious. After thinking about it, she took it and carefully opened the box. When she saw what was inside, Jing Yunjiao was stunned. After a few seconds, her face showed a trace of amazement. A bird. This is a crow. It's not a crow, it's a raven. I encountered it when I was doing a mission. The mother bird died, and I hatched this thing. Li Xiaoyun's expression was somewhat doting. You hatched it. Jing Yunjiao's mouth twitched. Why did these words sound so strange? That can't be helped. The other eggs were all swallowed by the snake, leaving only this one. I wanted to cook it, but I heard that the dodo bird has a high IQ, comparable to that of a gorilla. It should be suitable for you, Li Xiaoyun said simply. Of course, this was not the only reason. The raven was not a beautiful bird, but it was very smart and cunning. It could also learn human language. Most importantly, the raven was a type of bird that mainly lived alone. Other than its mate, it usually did not have anyone else to cooperate with. It was a kind of husband and wife bird. Jing Yunjiao didn't think too much about it. He was really stunned by the black guy in front of him. Although it was completely black, it was different from other birds. Its body had a kind of purple and blue flowing light, and its feathers were very neat and smooth. Its neck was raised high, and there was a rose in its mouth. It didn't look very big, and only its feathers were fully grown. However, its pair of eyes were very lively. When she reached out to tease it, it put the rose in its mouth into her palm. Ah Jiao Tilda suddenly, the raven in front of her opened its mouth and let out a low and somewhat strange voice. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.